I don't want to waste anyone's time. I don't really want to be here, but no one else is doing this, so I feel like I have to. I'm just gonna be as quick as possible. So what is the Parental Guide to Books? Basically, it's what I started searching for once I started reading more adult books. And, especially like leaving the safety or, perceived safety of young adult books and venturing out into the more mature stuff. I just felt like, I wanted to know what I was getting into, what exactly is in these books. And nobody really talks about it. There's no IMDb for books. There's no rating system. There's no comprehensive, handbook, if you will, to explain to you what's going to be in a book, what you should be forewarned about. So I guess that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to, but no one else is doing it. And that makes me sad. So we're just gonna do our best. So for this guide, what I'm going to do is there are gonna be 5 parts, and within each part there are 3 subcategories that I'm going to put these parts into. It's mild, moderate, and explicit. And the first category that we're going to go over is language. Obviously this is probably the easiest category to go into. And I'm kind of just gonna follow the movie rating system on this one. If you have more than one F-bomb, you're explicit. If you have like slurs, like racial slurs or sexual identity slurs or whatever, explicit. And I'll give my thoughts on the language in the book. And I'll share like exact numbers so you can decide for yourself whether or not something is, too much for you. Next category is frightening or intense scenes. This one's kind of a catch-all for the types of stuff that isn't easy to categorize, but the imagery is still disturbing or can cause discomfort or, it's hard to classify, but you know that there's something wrong with it. And not necessarily everybody can deal with. And I'm sure as I go along, this section's going to require a lot more refinement on my part, and I'm hoping that as I go along, I'll find my pace. Some of these are a little long, so if I look down at my notes, sorry. I just want to stay on topic. The next one is violence and gore, and this one is a little bit harder to classify. I think that how I'm going to categorize it is, how long are we in violence and gore? How long is it being described? To what depth or detail is it being described? I think those things are pretty clear. Body horror, torture porn. It's more likely to get an explicit. It's not guaranteed, but it's more likely. And then violence or abuse, specifically abuse, it's much more likely to get an explicit rating as well as a trigger warning. And I'm going to talk about those at the end. The next category is probably the most controversial. It's going to be sex and nudity. With nudity, if it's very innocent and not sexualized, it could get as low as a mild rating on it. I mean, I think about, right here. So like in the Silmarillion, there's like a few scenes of people running naked through the forest, and there's absolutely nothing sexual about it. Tolkien, surprise, in case you didn't know, doesn't go into graphic detail. So I would put that at a mild. It just mentions that they're naked and it's not a big deal. And then as far as everything else, so if we're going to first base, so kissing, that's going to be mild most of the time, I would say. If we get to second base, which is above the waist touching, it's probably going to venture more into moderate territory. And then, if we get third base and above, it's kind of complicated. And this category is really where it depends on how descriptive or graphic it is, and then also how long is this lasting, like how much of the book is dedicated to this sort of thing. And I think the best example I can think of is like, so if you've got some authors where you're there for the spice, like it's not really a secret. And if it's like, if they're going into a lot of detail, but it's just like making out, or it does that thing where it's like, it's kind of the beginning of them getting intimate and then it fades to black, that's probably going to end up being moderate. Similarly, if they if they actually like mention the people having sex, it depends on how graphic it is, because there are some authors that are just very straightforward and they kind of just say, like, it takes like a half a paragraph and they're like, oh, and then they had sex, and you're just like, oh, okay, whatever, not a big deal. And so that is more likely to get moderate as well. So fades to black and doesn't describe the actual event, as well as, this might be kind of insulting to people, but bland sex, it's gonna probably end up in moderate. Now, if it's like we're going into detail and we're describing and beginning to end, you're probably gonna end up in explicit. And then also, I hope one of the things I want to do with that is I'll include page numbers so that you can skip that sort of thing. And I probably should have mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again, but for most things, if they are explicit and infrequent enough, then I will give page numbers. But there are some books where that's not really feasible. For instance, I just finished Harrow the Ninth, and giving page numbers for all the violence and gore or all the frightening scenes, it's just not going to happen. So anyway, the final category is other or trigger warnings. So this is also kind of a catch-all category. It's more to categorize events or topics that don't necessarily fall into those other things, but I feel like they need commentary. And then specifically regarding triggers, I can't believe this isn't common practice in publishing. It should be. Everyone should be able to escape or enjoy their version of escapism without being further traumatized. You should never have to worry about a book that you pick up that it will hurt you, unless you're like, masochistic and you're going for the stuff that is meant to hurt you, you know what I mean? But it drives me nuts that there are some things that happen in books and you're caught off guard and there's nothing to be said or done. You're just out of luck. Specifically regarding triggers, sexual assault, rape, or abuse, those are automatically going to get page numbers. I'm going to give you warnings up front. And yeah, I mean, honestly, for most things, if it is explicit enough, like I said before, I'm going to try and give you trigger warnings. And then I'll probably explain this in the next video when I talk about the first 2 books that I read for this. But I'll try and give you all the information up front, because I hate when people beat around the bush and waste your time talking. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. I'll probably have to film it again in a while. I don't know how many people are going to actually see this, but even if it's only like a couple of people, if a couple of people stumble across this and it helps them navigate the world of adult books, I will be so happy. So anyway, happy reading. Also, I just realized that I just filmed all those videos and did not once say my name. Hi, I'm Nicole. Nice to meet you.